direction.
No, this is awesome. And I'd steer you back to the diagram on page 228 and for you
Yeah.
to sort of excavate, do you work on specific films like documentary films, or is it documentary films in a particular genre?
I'm
Like,
working on a Netflix TV series right now.
okay, okay, cool. So the the craft community is your community of other people who are doing what you're doing, and that is a very valuable one because writers or did you say you're a writer? Is that what you are? Is that your role there? Oh, you're art director. That's right. So the number of people that are doing what you're doing at the level you're doing it at, the amount of information and knowledge and the variance of experience across all the folks that are in your profession is so vast and so valuable. I always like to say you don't have to actually touch the stove to know it's hot when you just saw somebody else burn themselves on it, right? And this is a hunk of value that you can get from other art directors. And I don't know how many, what the budgets of these things are, but sometimes there are several art directors on any individual product and their project. And by befriending them, asking advice way before you ever offer any, that I think that ends up being a great audience for you to, a community rather, for you to participate in. And if, just as an example, let's just say you look around and there isn't a bunch of Facebook communities or a bunch of great email lists for people that are in your area of work. This is an insight that maybe start one, because this positions you as not necessarily an authority, but as someone who cares, and people can feel whether or not you care. And these people who can feel it, they are your customers, they are your peers, they are the people who hire you. This is a valuable service that you can provide, not just for the community, but ultimately for yourself as well. And it doesn't have to be a heavy lift. It doesn't have to be you now being a full-time community organizer. That is what so many of us think. I think you can scale your effort to the group of art directors who work on TV film series and learn a lot, even if it's just to gripe about clients or to learn about someone who's not that great to work for, someone who's really amazing to work for. And it's very consistent across industries that people have a fear of in having a community around a narrow thing like that, where you get hired and fired by a small-ish number of people, that if you give away your trade secrets or your contacts or whatever, that you are somehow putting yourself at a disadvantage. It's very common. In fact, I only have the experience of the opposite being true. And when you show up like that, and you show up with an open book, an open rolodex, and you bring transparency to an industry that historically hasn't had that, or you bring authenticity to a community that was historically full of backstabbers and mine people who are hoarding information, it has this extraordinary power to blow all that up in your favor. It's like showing up being confident in a way that when everyone else around you is not confident, there's you get to be perceived as an anchor. This in turn provides trust, not just a trust that you have with others or they might have in you, but one trust that you have with yourself, your ability to put information out there. In short, it's very hard for me to quantify all of this stuff, but it's very easy for me to assert from experience, my own experience in deconstructing the successful lives of so many other people that have created or cultivated this community around their craft. Downstream from that, if it's the end audience, I know there are a lot of people who want to be art directors on the level of projects that you are working on. There are a lot of people who want to do exactly what you're doing right now. And that is a great community for you to cultivate. Even if you think there are 10 people who are interested, there's probably 10 million. That's the cool thing about the internet, right? And so whether you're, like, you can imagine One is a bunch of your peers, people who do the same thing as you do. And the other is people who would love to do the same thing that you do, who are maybe in the broader concept of art directors, and maybe some of them are not necessarily in TV, but they're currently in digital, and they want to go into being an art director for online video or something. You start to see the different permutations of and the different scales that you could operate at, the different kinds of communities that you can participate in. And I would just say, don't limit yourself. Ultimately, becoming a joiner, again, that thing on 229, my goal in saying that is not to get you to burn your time or spoil all of the time that you want to put in and burn in developing community. But it's you start to develop a feel of what's working and what's not working. Do more of what's working and less of what's not working. And I think there are probably 10 different ways you can further slice this. I use my example of photography and action sports, and my overlapping core community then is other action sports photographers. So however you position your Venn diagram, I would encourage you to try and do that 4 or 5 different times. Show up to some of those different communities, and you'll see which ones provide value for you and where you might be able to add value to the other community. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. You're still muted there, Lauren. Sorry. Just as an example, Lauren, I just want to tell you, I'm looking at Facebook and I'm looking at YouTube Live, and there are people saying, I would love to do what you do. So, I mean, yeah, where are we here? Patricia Thomas Smith says, how does one get their story ideas out there to the right person to get on Netflix? Like, just that is a micro example of however many people are watching right now. There's already people who are in your community or ripe for a community that you can champion or play a small role in or start your own just today, just in this small teeny subset. And never lose track of that. That is a thing. That is part of why there's 50 faces here in the Zoom call, and everyone can see the comments if you're on any of these social platforms. It's just a reminder that you're not alone, and that is a huge part of the creative process. This continual bringing back to, I'm adding value to myself, and the best art, the best creations add value to others. Remember, everything around us was created, and I'm benefiting from the creative aspirations of so many other people right now with this microphone, the technology, the monitor, the desk, the furniture, the refrigerator that's keeping my LaCroix cold right there. There's, it's really hard to overstate. Allie over on Facebook, Bernie on Facebook, Eric, Grady. Thank you so much for your comments. They're chiming in support of this community, and they're behind you, Lauren. They want you to know that you got this. Let's see here, going back to my document. All right. This is going to be my request to share a potentially negative experience, and takes a little bit more courage. Just know that I appreciate anyone being willing to volunteer. I'm going to paint a picture here. You have been working on this presentation at work, or the song, or this fill in the blank, whatever it is, whatever your craft, you've been working on it for a long time, and you put it out there, and it was tumbleweeds, it was crickets, it was nothing. Right now, you might understand, aha, I know why the person who sits across from me at work, or who has a very similar profile to me on Instagram, why their work is, Chase is telling me right now why their work is being recognized and mine wasn't, because they've been building community. So that now, post facto. But I would love to hear from someone who had the experience of putting something out there. It didn't get picked up. They didn't get the traction that they were hoping for. And now they've got some fear because of it. Anybody willing to go there? Yes. All right. I'm unmuting. The name there is Kim, but there are 2 people, so I don't want to be presumptuous. Welcome to the chat. I'm asking you to unmute. There you go. Can't wait to hear. Please share.
Hi, Chase. My name is Lance. I'm a writer. I've been writing pretty much since I was 9. A few years ago, I wrote a horror novel. It was part of the NaNoWriMo, where you try to write a book in 30 days.
Love it.
Pulled off 59,000 words in 30 days. Went through about 4 edits and put it out there into the world to a publisher in New York. It was a small independent publisher. It went through their original editor, who was emailing me every couple of days about how amazing the book was, how scary the book was. His wife was even mad at me because he was reading it out loud to her and she was having nightmares.
Oh,
wow. It went all the way up to their chief editor, and they were talking about all the things they wanted to do with it. And then suddenly I got an email from them. They rejected the book. And their reasoning was they didn't think that they were a big enough or capable enough publisher to do anything with the book. And they thought that if they put it out, it would just lay there. Mm-hmm. And it kind of sabotaged the whole thing to have all of that positive feedback and then to just have them dump it. Even after I said to them, I'm completely okay with us growing together, because this is my first book. It's my first novel. I've had poems and short stories published, but it's my first novel. And they still rejected it. And I've submitted it a couple of places since then, but not really with the same kind of enthusiasm. It kind of train wrecked my enthusiasm for that particular story.
Well, and you said Lance is your name?
Yeah.
Lance, let's have everybody give a shout out to Lance for sharing. That's hardcore, man. I appreciate you. And I'm going to a couple of follow-up questions, and then I'm going to deconstruct a little bit of what I think is going on and what maybe a recommendation. So, have you done anything else since? Have you written another novel? Are you writing consistently on another project?
I write consistently, probably 1,500 to 3,000 words a day on different projects, depending on what I'm working on. I've completed 1 book since then, but primarily I'm focusing on poetry and some nonfiction currently. And she and I are working together. She's a photographer, and we're working on a couple of joint projects.
Amazing. All right. So that is music to my ears, because here's what often happens. So I want you to pat yourself on the back. When you have a lot of, especially early enthusiasm from your friends, or in this case, from the publisher, you take a few steps, you start leaning in, and then you get smacked down. What often happens is this period of mourning, a period of sort of reconciliation with the being let down. And that you are continuing to write is very uncommon and very powerful in your favor. Like, kudos to you. That's huge. And there's a couple of lines in the book, and I have in my notes here, that as a reminder to all of us, you are not your work, right? Your work is one aspect that you are trying to create and share with others. And it has so many things intertwined with it. Your level of skill and actually being able to say what you want to say, your ability to just to be good at the craft, right? Like that's the creative gap, right? The gap of what you can do as a photographer, what you see in your mind and what you're actually capable. There's often a gap there unless you're a master. You see one thing and you put it on, it doesn't quite look like that. And so almost by definition, right, if you haven't mastered something and you put it out there and there's a gap, that gap leaves room for misunderstanding and misunderstanding of the work, of your intention, of whatever. That's why you master your craft. So the message that you want to say is the same exact message that gets out there in the world. But also remember that you can't control the other people. You can't control the receivers of your art. So if you can, by practice, disconnect from that you are the product of the work product that goes out there in the world. And so in rejecting the work, the publisher's not rejecting you, the artist. They might have 50 other things that look exactly like the thing that you don't know why they would have rejected it, right? There might be there might be 5 other projects that are exactly like yours that are further along in the pipeline, or someone they've worked with for a long time who's working on something that's similar enough that they can't publish 2 things that look like it. There's 1,000 ways, and me recounting all of them is not, the best use of your time. But when it comes to launching products, putting them out there in the world, getting them in front of the people that are hopefully your allies in getting this work to the world, there's going to be so many different emotions coming up, and there's going to be so many different opportunities for things to go not well, that if you can disconnect the amount of success or recognition or traction or whatever word you want to use that work gets, you will be stronger because of it. Now, what Lance has going for him is that I heard that he wasn't dissuaded in the act of writing. So many people, it just causes them to freeze, and they don't do anything else, and they will do everything to try and get this work put somewhere, because there's the sunk work fallacy of, oh, now I did this work, therefore I have to keep banging the door on this project. And I know lots of people, myself included, who have created something and have shopped it and shopped it and shopped it, and it's still not getting the kind of traction that you want, or it's not getting the adoption that you think it should be in the marketplace. You know what? Get back to creating. This is the Andy Warhol quote, like, let everybody else judge your work, and while they're judging it, you're just making more work. So when Lance, stands in front of a couple thousand people here and talks about being rejected by a publisher, it's my hope that in having him be vulnerable like that, that you realize that you're not alone. And we've all had this concept of tumbleweeds. The next question that I want to ask Lance, if I may, is, now that we're talking about community, and now that you realize that's just one publisher that you have a relationship with, they've seen some of your work, can you describe to us, are there other actions that you are taking to further build and develop your community? Or it sounds like you're very prolific, and this is what a lot of creators do, is they just put their head in the work. That's awesome. And they'll write you've already got another book, and you're working on 2 other poems and 3 other nonfiction pieces. I just want to ask if you're building community, because if you're not spending time building community and you're just cranking out the work, this belief that the work will stand on its own and that merit happens to meritorious works, that's a false belief. So, and I'm asking this in order to be able to provide help and further guidance. If you're not, don't worry about it. But I want to know, are you spending more time cultivating community?
I am now. Like, I'm almost obnoxiously extroverted. I'm a storyteller of storytellers of storytellers, and I've done everything from stand-up comedy to magic. So I'm out there.
Yes, amazing. I had a great magic routine when I was in 2nd grade. It's clearly fallen off now, but
so I'm friends with a lot of writers, including some fairly famous ones, and we talk a lot about just the work and what's trending and what's interesting and what's beautiful being written out there right now.
Mm-hmm.
So now that I'm kind of getting past the hump of that book that I really loved so much getting dropped, and getting back to writing things that I think are actually even better than that book, I think that I'm past that hurdle of the rejection.
Okay.
And it's really been contacting other writers and photographers and just artists in general and saying, what are you struggling with? Because this is what I'm struggling with, and we all kind of talk each other through it.
Cool. Let me ask another question here. I'm using this 3rd topic of launch, and you in particular, Lance, as a little bit of a case study here, because here's what I heard. You're continuing to connect with other writers, other publishers, that's fantastic. Very valuable. But if I'm doing the map of the community map that I'm asking you to draw from page 228, where you've got your craft community, sounds like you're investing a lot of time there. But are other writers the primary? I'm just going to say you write in science fiction. This is not the point, but the point is actually to create a little distance between you and whatever you write. So there's the people who consume science fiction readers, science fiction book buyers, and then there's other writers. right? And I want to know, are you cultivating a relationship with end consumers who are ultimately going to buy your books or to buy the books that your poems are in? What I do find is that, and this may not be true with you, so I'll let you chime in just a second, but a lot of, and this is what I noticed in large part in the photography community when I first tapped into it, was all full of other photographers who were in an echo chamber of photography, talking about how to get their work 1% better. And the last time I checked, this is one of the reasons I sort of shied away from that group early on, is because I was like, okay, how many of you people are going to buy my photography? Who's going to license it and put it on a billboard somewhere? Who's going to license it and put it in front of X number of people? So I realized that they were a community, but not the community that I needed to foster. I need to start building a community. Those are communities I can join. I can join the photography community. It existed before I, came into being, and it will exist long after me. That's a thing that is ongoing and I can join. But what about the community of people who are ready and willing and excited to receive your work? What if you put in, you're writing 3,000 words a day? That's just amazing. Again, the ability to be a prolific artist is it's so valuable. What if you spent 1,000 of those words every day writing a daily newsletter, and you created a group of people who like what you write, and you took a couple online classes at Creative Live or on the internet or wherever you want to go about building a community or writing an email newsletter for a select group of people that has a little bit of your writing, a little bit about what you're writing. Those are people who are going to be buying your product. And notice, this is not participating with other writers and other publishers, and you need to show up at all the places where those people will buy and promote your book. But what I found as an example is I went with Harper, whether you go with Penguin Random House or anything. They're actually, when they give you an advance, they're giving you an advance based in large part of the community that you've already developed. They look at that fee as an acquisition cost for them. They're acquiring new users through you. So until you start to have an audience of your own, the publisher is going to be less likely to invest in you, because there's someone who they would determine is of similar quality to you that has been developing their own set of customers ready to receive their work. And I want to make sure you understand the difference between having relationships with publishers and having relationships with other writers and relationships with an end consumer. Talk to me, Lance.
I think that I've got the writers and I've got the consumers, but the publishers part is sort of out of it. I publish quite a bit of stuff just sort of free to the public on my Facebook page. Mm-hmm. But that's really the only place I publish is there. Okay. I do want to start a website, a blog, something like that. I think I need a little bit of guidance on the technology of that whole thing.
Sure.
And how to maintain it and how to spread it. So yep. I think that idea of taking a class is probably going to be really beneficial for that kind of thing.
Sure. And I'll give you two other things. Go to medium.com, click start an account. You can be writing on Medium inside of 5 minutes. Go to wordpress.com, click on start a blog. And right now I was thinking like, oh my God, I'd have to have the perfect URL. What am I going to write about? No one's going to read it for the first 6 months. So just get writing, put your ideas down. And in that first 6 months, you've got plenty of time to figure out all the other details. But everybody wants to figure it out and get it perfect before they start, which is the reverse of what they ought to do to create the most value for themselves and their readers. So just this last little exchange we've had here, it sounds like you've got a relationship with other artists and authors. Sounds like you'd like to know more publishers, but what I want you to do is create an audience around your work, create an audience of consumers willing to pay for your work. And the way that you do that is on very small, lightweight ways over a long period of time. This is why it's the classic 10-year overnight success, right? And just your Facebook group alone is not enough.
Right.
If you can write long form on Facebook, I don't think you can, then that would be maybe a better one. But because they can't really consume your writing, or if you're just pushing your writing to the platform and not actually engaging there, you're missing on a huge opportunity. I do like the idea of personal blogs, and I like personal email newsletters, because being able to be in someone's inbox is a very valuable place to be, because they've said that they know you, they trust you, they want to hear from you. And, at Creative Live and me personally, constantly trimming that list, because the people who aren't engaging with that work, they're not my people. So, and if you're not this, you're the classic, perfect example for us to have this conversation around, Lance, because you're engaged, you're willing to do the work. You've had some early rejection, but I think I sense a confidence that your work is good, and over time you will find the right audience. But what I'd like you to do is spend some very explicit time building an email list, cultivating a relationship in social channels. Just so you know, I recognize you showing up here as part of this, because right now there's some people like, I want to know, maybe you can put your, any of your writing, links to some of your writing here in the chat. This is part of showing up, but I want you to overemphasize, take 30 minutes of that 90 minutes that you're writing 3,000 words every day, and go leave comments on other people's Facebook pages, go leave comments on other people's Instagram, show up at, at the Nanaimo. There's a Nanaimo, is that right? I always get, that's Nanaimo. I think that's a city in Canada. It's a ferry place in Canada. That's right. And yes, whatever the writing group is called, where you write a book in a certain amount of time, there's a huge community there. Start to see those humans out there, buyers of the work. All right, I went deep with you, Lance. Huge shout out to you. Congratulations for having the discipline to do the work. Now there's the same amount of work that you've put into your craft, because clearly you're proficient, you're prolific, you're engaged with what you do. I want you to find a way through this community, through Creative Live classes, to get better at social media, to start writing in a public forum, and to create an email list, because that is the unlock for you. And this is why Amplify exists. You're the perfect person to share your experience. And I want to say thank you for showing up, bud. All right. I want to touch base on, a little bit more here on launch, make sure I have a few additional notes here. A lot of people, I guess I'll go back to what we used Lance as an example. He stepped up and was willing to talk about being rejected. Rejection comes in lots of forms. There's the story that I tell in the book of Jia Zheng, who created rejection therapy. And rejection therapy, and if you're not familiar with that, or you missed this part of it, that is the idea of getting used to being told no. Tim Ferriss, I think he got turned down by 36 publishers for the 4-Hour Workweek before one took a chance on him. And this idea of getting used to hearing no, I think the blog post that I would steer you towards on my site it says yes is for wimps. And this process of orienting yourself around getting rejected is developing a muscle of willingness to continue to put your work out there and get rejected. Jia Zhang, just to tell that story, if you're not familiar with his work, he thought he was about to break through in his startup. He had funding and everything, and in short, he lost it all and was very sad and frustrated, and realized this is one of the first major rejections he's had in his life. And so he wanted to get used to it. And so he tried to get rejected every day. And he was doing a number of things like asking people for favors, or my favorite example is two interesting things come out of this. One is he went to Krispy Kreme donuts, and it was during the Olympics, and he said, "Hey, I really like all your donuts, but what I don't see here in the shelf is the Olympic rings. So I'm wondering if you can make me the 5 Olympic ring, a donut that looks like that with the colored frosting and stuff." And of course, anyone in this call who isn't familiar with the story is expecting them to laugh him out of the building. But what you'd be surprised to know is that they actually made it for him. They made him this custom donut, and it was because he asked. And so while certainly he got used to being rejected because he asked as many absurd things as he can with the goal of getting told no, you'd also be surprised at the number of things that he was, that people obliged in his ask. So you're ultimately creating multiple muscles when you're doing this process of getting used to small, lightweight rejections. He asked, another example, he asked a police officer if he could drive his car. Cop said yes. He drove this police car around. So this combination of being willing to be rejected as a mechanism for developing thick skin and realizing simultaneously that if you don't ask for it, people are not out there running around looking to provide you with all the things you need if they don't know how they can help you. This combination of things is very, very powerful. So there's a lot of tie also with who matters. Now, a show of hands and maybe chime in the comments if you're familiar with my original conversation with Brene Brown. It has to be 10 years old now. I consider Brene a dear friend. And that interview, if you type my name and hers, you'll see 3 or 4 times she's been on my podcast or Creative Live. The oldest one, I think, is one that I would ask you to go check out. And again, sorry, show of hands if you've seen or heard that conversation. Diana is very excited about it. Most of the people, I put it at there's a couple of pages here in the Zoom callers. I put it at 50%. So for the other 50% who are not familiar with that, that would be a recommendation as another piece of work. And I'm seeing comments come in, a lot of people from around the world. Yes, favorite episode ever. Of course. Oh, sorry. Leo wants to know what was the rejections guy's name. Jia, J-I-A, Jang, J-A-N-G. So lots of folks have seen that. And one aspect of that, one thing we cover in that episode, which is why I bring it up, is because Brene carries around a list. I think it's 5 people. She's written down the list of whose opinions of her actually matters at the end of her life. In a perfect world, is it your next door neighbor or the person down the street, or in the narrowest sense, whose opinion of you, whose esteem of you actually matters? And the idea behind here is your spouse, maybe your children, just whatever the list is, your best friend. She writes that list down and she carries it around with her. And in moments where internet comments come in or another rejection letter comes in from a publisher, you look at that list. And if the name of the person who rejected you, or the next door neighbor who chided you for something, or the band member who didn't want you to be a part of the band anymore because they thought your singing wasn't right for the band, if their name is not on that list, then what do? You just get your ass back to work and you start looking for other people, different communities, more people to connect with your work. That is not that person. So I would encourage you with some homework to make this list. And it is a list. It should be short. I like the idea of carrying it with you. I put it in my phone. However you treat it, whatever you do with it is up to you. I just find it to be a valuable exercise. And again, if you're just tuning in or you missed the part of the intro, this is from my conversation with Brene Brown. I think it might have been 2010. God, that sounds crazy. It's just, I found it personally very valuable. There's also a quote that Brene champions, which is a Roosevelt quote called "The Man in the Arena." As another thing I would encourage you to look up on the internet, "The Man in the Arena." Very gender biased, I acknowledge. Try and look through that and see the quote for the merits of it. And in short, it's, if you're not in the arena and you're up in the cheap sheets, I don't actually care what you think. This is a very powerful muscle to develop when you're launching anything out into the world, whether it's a presentation at work or your first novel. If others are in the arena and you respect them, maybe they're not on that list, but there's someone who is actually doing the same work that you are doing. I like to listen to those people, especially if they are further along in the process than I am, have more experience, are further along in mastery of the subject that I am trying to master. But here's a weird thing that correlates with those people. They are almost never the people that throw rocks, because you know what? They're actually doing the work. We all usually get nasty comments from people who are not as far along in the process as we are, or who not subject matter experts like we are, or who are not actually doing the work. So whether it's from the cheap seats or any other comment that's unwarranted, I would develop a muscle and a mechanism for determining what matters and what doesn't. That's the point of the list. And also a radar for people whose opinions do matter, whether they're on that list or they're people who are further along on the process than you. Again, my experience is they generally don't comment on your work, especially negatively. They might say a positive thing. When I leave comments and I see photography that I like, I see writing that I like, I use products that I love, I try and give them a shout out, because as someone who's built products that are used by tens of millions of people, and by someone who has won a lot of awards in photography and created a living and a life for myself, I know, having been through that the person who's seeing that comment right now will get a little jolt of positivity. All right. Success is fleeting. Failure is never permanent. All things shall pass. Also, success is not required. You can do everything right, and still get the result that's different than the result that you want. That's because the world is a complex and very dynamic thing. So many folks were so well positioned. I'll just use the example of my friend Amy, who started a co-working space called The Riveter. It's a place built by women to include everyone, co-working specifically with that ethos in mind. It was doing so well. COVID hit, can't get people together. She had great investors, a great idea, very timely idea. So many things were working, and not a lot of us could see a global pandemic coming as an easy and swift way to crush a business. If that business happens to be getting people together in a small room, you can see how that would have a negative effect. I believe that Amy did virtually everything she could to create success that she was experiencing through what I felt like was merit, and then to have a global pandemic wipe it out. Again, you can do all of the things right and still not get the outcome you want. That is in part why I recommend you not be attached to the outcome, and you start to attach yourself to the process, the process that Lance shared about loving writing and putting it out there. And the end result may not be what you envision, but one thing is for sure, and that you will grow in the process of whatever it is that you are doing, whether it's becoming better at cultivating a community waiting to receive your work, whether it is you're working on your craft, whether you're trying to find your core community that is the overlap between the craft and the focus communities. I don't have any experience with anyone saying that none of the work that they put in on those things was not helpful. Only the opposite is true, that they learned something from that. And as we said back in week 1, the cool thing about the creative process and about creativity is no effort is ever wasted. All right, so I'm going to do a little recap here. 3 topics for today on Amplify, where you need to find your people, do the work to think about communities and join them, build your audience. Building an audience is not just social media. Building an audience is developing a relationship, a one-on-one, small number of relationships with people who are actually ready to receive your work. These are not co-craftspeople. These are not people that are in your industry necessarily. These are people who buy and consume whatever it is that you're making, or they subscribe to services that you're providing, and then launch. When you launch, decouple the results of the launch with who you are as a human being. Sharing and shame are unnecessarily connected. I'm encouraging you to disconnect the shame or the worry or the sadness, the guilt, any number of these negative emotions with the process of sharing your work. You are not your work. What you are doing is learning how to create an audience, because everyone who has cultivated success for themselves has cultivated an audience ready to receive their work. So that's what you're working right now, and decouple shame and embarrassment. Part of the way that you do that is reading that quote, "The Man in the Arena," writing down people who actually matter to you. And if the criticism that you're getting is not from someone who's on that list, keep going. I want you to do the homework. I want you to do that list of people whose opinions of you actually matter deeply to you, not just sort of on the surface. It's nice if your neighbor likes you, but not required. 2, I want you to identify your communities: craft, focus, and then core. I want you, and I'm using, again, Lance, thank you so much for sharing. You were amazing at this. Start putting work out there where your community, the community that you'd love to have, who are clamoring for your work, where you think they hang out, start putting your work there. End consumer. Who's the customer that will actually write a check, would sign up for an email newsletter, would give their text, their email, whatever, to be a part of your community? Start adding value to those people where they are. Do not expect them to, come to you. You have to go where they are. So put your work into lots of places. And a lot of this has to do with learning how to be very uncomfortable, because although we are social animals, we have been conditioned to be risk adverse. We look at being rejected by a publisher or not getting very many likes on our Instagram post as the saber-toothed tiger. Neither of those things are true. Being rejected by a publisher and not getting very many likes is not going to have a near-term negative effect on your ability to stay alive. So remember that you're working against your biology, and your biology wants you to be scared and operate from a position of lack. It's through the process of creating over and over again that you're going to disconnect or you're going to, turn down the volume of the noise in the system that having fans and followers can create. In short, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And then when you do struggle, when you do get a rejection, what I love about Lance's story is that you could say that that was a failure because he wrote a book, tried to get it published, and didn't succeed. Or you can look at that as just a stepping stone, because do we believe that Lance will get this book out there? I do, unequivocally. And you can see a lot of other people do too, Lance. So, failure is only failure if you stop. And clearly you haven't stopped, Lance. And I would invite all of you to take a page out of that book and look at failure as lightweight, lowercase f failure as a stepping stone to success. Look back. The best way to do this is look at some other aspects of your life where you first got thrown a curveball, and then what was the downstream effect of that? It either strengthened your resolve, helped you learn new skills, made you turn in a different direction where you didn't expect to create success, and you certainly then were able to find something. You can look backwards at a number of these elements of rejection or failure in your life and recognize how critical it was to where you are now. Remember when you wanted what you have or what you're doing or who you're becoming right now. Remember that, because chances are it wasn't all that long ago. All right. Those are some action steps. I want to do a closing read, and then I'm going to take questions for another 15 minutes or so, because we've had a chance to integrate some of the questions into the curriculum. From page 244 is where the closing read is going to be. Actually, I'll just read it out. My cut and paste it here. Creators create. first and foremost. But if they want someone else to care, they lay the groundwork for future success while they're working. Think of the artists and entrepreneurs who are crushing it right now. There was a time when nobody paid any attention to what they did. They spent years participating in order to do what they've done now. They spent years in other communities establishing a base camp and patiently adding value to others until people started to notice them and their unique contributions. Slowly, they built direct connections with people. Eventually, there came a tipping point when that creator suddenly had a thriving community of their own, eager to engage with what she had to share. This is the thing about building community. There's so much work in the trenches. And remember, it's the work that happens when no one is watching that matters the most. I have responded, if I haven't responded to a DM or some individual communication with probably, I would say but that's probably a stretch, with most of the 4,200 people who are doing this class that we're doing right now, I would be surprised. How long would it take you to type out 4,000 messages? A long time. That is the amount of time that I've put up into just creating this, let alone the tens of millions at Creative Live, right? When you start to uncork the sort of either success or the participation or the relationship that the creators that you admire or the folks that are living a life that you aspire to live or that you're inspired by, when you start to deconstruct the amount of work that's gone in, it can have one of two effects. You can say, I can do that work. Sweet. I'm going to start doing it now, replying to DMs, reaching out to other people, adding comments on their posts, or overwhelm. Oh my God, they've been doing that for 10 years. Right now, Lance is saying, like, I want to get my next book out there in 2 weeks. I don't have 2 years. It's okay. We're all impatient, but this is where the long game of building community comes in. The only thing you can do wrong is not start. All right. That's the closing read. Now, my favorite part is, let's call this one-on-one in front of thousands of people advice. I want to find a way to add value to as many people as I can in a short amount of time. I want to go to Facebook and say, Ali Rice, thank you so much. She's looking for her base camp, looking to create real connections. Harriet loves the statement, failure is only failure if you stop. Radonna talks about failure pushing her to do better. Diana is using me as an example, loving that I personally, Chase, have followed so many paths and none of them have been mistakes. We've learned something from every one of those, and that's true. All right, who wants to go into some therapy land? One-on-one, how can I add some value to the folks on the call here? All right, Henry Travis is in the house. Henry, nice to have you. I don't think we've heard from you yet. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having the show. I am getting a lot of every week. My question was going to be, as we kind of climb that mountain on different projects, I would say I'm a starter and I'm involved in lots of different projects. But as we go to the top of the mountain, even after I've had some successes, the challenge for me is when I can't see that path. And so I kind of take the long-term view where I kind of just take the easiest way and have had a hard time digging in to really try to make great strides. So my question is just, how do you pick the next hill to climb? Do you take the easy way? Do you just go straight up? How do you decide the next way to tackle a problem?
I love getting really clear about the problem. And I confess right now, I don't know if your biggest challenge is where to next invest time to grow your community, or if you have some other challenge. So I want to get really precise on your problem, as precise as we can do, as precise as we can get in here, as you're willing to get here. So be as specific as you can. Where are you right now? And what do you wish you had more, or what was different in your life?
Okay, so I'm working on an app development project for myself personally, and it's been several years.
Let me ask a question, Henry. When you
Yes.
say, so is your audience an audience of one? You want to write an app that just solves problems for Henry?
Yes. So I'm solving a problem that I have, and then I think 0.1% of 7 million people have.
Okay.
And so, but I'm building it for myself first.
That's a good process. I just want to make sure that you don't want that to be the
Right.
end audience. So you're building something because you have a problem, that's one of the reasons I built Best Camera app, because there was no great place to take a picture, add a cool filter, and then share it to social media. So I like your thesis. This is good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're building a product that you think you like, and by extension, lots of other people. Keep going.
Okay. And over the years, I've been doing it single-handedly in my spare time.
Okay.
And I've had some successes. I've gotten things that are up and running on in development. But obviously, the end goal is going to be on the App Store, and I'm not there yet. And I've had some technical challenges, and so do I focus on the development piece, or do I outsource it? Do I focus on? And so I have kind of dabbled in other areas like Sketch for logos and icons and things like that. And so I kind of tend to go to what makes sense.
Okay, that's very helpful. That little the details that you add around there. So a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Your job is to build a working prototype that you can use to both make sure that it's solving the problem that you've identified, and then ask other people if it solves them that problem for them. In the meantime, which is very relevant to the thing we're talking about right now, is, are you cultivating that community of 0.1 of 7 billion people? Do you know where those people are? Do you have friends? Can you name them? If you held a party, would anybody show up? If you put out a newsletter, would anybody read it? Because again, right now, you're a focus group of one. You have no other inputs. What I would like you to do is have a group of people that you trust that are trying to solve a similar problem that you're trying to solve, or that would be willing to give you feedback on the thing that you're creating in order to solve the problem. This is the community. Nothing one, develop a working prototype. And until the prototype is working, keep developing the prototype.
Right.
When you in parallel with this, because again, a prototype's worth 1,000 meetings. You can tell people what you're going to build, but when you show up and you have the thing in your hand, I built this, what do you think? It isn't. It's exponentially more valuable, because a lot of people, if you say, I'm describing this thing and I want it to look like this and be like this, we all have different levels of learning and cognition, our ability to visualize. They might give you feedback on a thing because they don't understand what you're trying to build, versus if you actually have the thing in your hand. Do you like this? Does this work? Does this thing, this widget, if hey, look at my fingers are sore and I can't really, my fingers are too big, I don't know how to play the guitar, I developed this thing called a pick. Here, use it. Mm-hmm. And a person who's been playing their guitar the whole life, has never seen a pick, is like, wow, this is incredibly useful. Without the pick, if you're just saying, yeah, I got a thing, they might be picturing a hatchet. It's too big. It's metal. It's not light enough. It's like, develop the thing. And I don't care if you outsource it. I'm not concerned with the tactic that you use. Until you have a working prototype, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. Create the working prototype. In parallel, if you had this working prototype today, who would you give it to? Who would you show it? Who would you be excited about putting it in front of? And if you don't have a long list of people who want to know that you have solved this problem, then you need to start to identify those. This is why I like, I'm going to make up some stuff right now so that you don't need to go too deep. If you're worried about your product or project, if you're willing, I'll ask you about it in a second so you can start to think about it while I'm talking if you want to share it. Let's say you're diabetic and you've developed an app that can read blood sugar through the skin, through your skin using the camera and the iPhone. Pie in the sky maybe, but let's just say you've developed that. Do you have a relationship with the American Diabetes Association? Are you a member of the trade organizations? Do you show up where people who have diabetes want to get more information? Do you have a blog where you write about having diabetes and what you do to put it at bay, to manage it, to work on cures? This is what I mean by building a community of people, because once you have the prototype, then you can set it in front of these people. I don't care if there's 100, 1,000, or 100,000 people who have diabetes or are oriented around solutions for diabetics. If you don't have that posse of people that, when you have this thing, are willing to set it in front of them and for them to give you feedback and say, oh my God, I'm willing to give you $2, $10, $100, or use this thing for free, sign up to your service. Then when you do put it out and you don't have anyone in your community, you're going to be met with this rejection that Jia Zhang was mentioning earlier. And it's not because the product's not good. It's a false negative. You've gotten a false negative because maybe the product is amazing. You just don't have any appropriate people to put it in front of. If your mother is not diabetic, you say, Mom, do you like my diabetic thing? She's going to say, like, yeah, I guess it's cool. Like being able to set the camera on your skin and get your blood reading, that's interesting. But is she going to buy it for $12 on the App Store? I don't know. The point is that this is another beautiful way of, Henry, of amplifying the challenge that we have. And I want to thank you for standing up. Do you want to tell us what it is you're developing, or would you rather not? Oh, we lost him. Oh, or you're muted. Henry,
Yeah.
I see you there. There you
Yeah.
go. Okay.
So not right now, but I would say that I was waiting to develop the MVP before I built my audience. But now after this session today, I really do see the value of going past just a handful of people that I've talked to it about and just try to branch out so that in a couple more years, when I have gotten there, that you're right, that I've got more audience to share it with and they can be excited about it.
Yep. Also, Henry, I encourage you to shorten your timeline. I do.
Yeah, it is a personal project, but yes, you're right.
It's fine. But that's one of the reasons we do that, is so that we can take the pressure off ourselves. It's great. But maybe what you need is a little accountability. If you're a starter, what a starter needs is some accountability.
Yes,
right?
I need to get off my butt and get an MVP.
Yes, exactly. This is why I said a prototype's worth 1,000 meetings.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, happy, Henry. Good stuff, bud. Thanks for sharing. I'm going to go to the Facebook group here. Grady says it's way easier to show the thing than to just share the idea of it. Could not underscore that as much. Again, prototypes worth 1,000 meetings. Ali asks from Facebook, if you provide a service and a proof of concept, does that equate to a prototype? I like the actual thing, because the first step after a proof of concept is a prototype, right? So again, it's actually like you're proving a concept, and whether you prove it through data or you prove it through a model or you prove it through a thing that doesn't actually work, but that looks like a thing that would work, I think it's still, there's a distance between a concept and an MVP, a minimum viable product, which is what Henry talked about. Now, in product development world, there's also there's a pyramid of like functionality. The base is like it does a little bit of what it wanted to do, and then the middle tier is that it's good at that, and then the tip is that it's polished and that you can see what it would look like in its end result. That's like if it's a perfect product. Rather than, most people want to create an MVP that just has some of the features. And the example is, if you are creating a car, a lot of people will make their MVP the tire. And that's the wrong decision, to make a small version of what it is that you want to work. So Ali, I'm specifically talking to you, and I don't know what product you're developing, but you understand how a tire isn't a great small piece of a car, because you can't actually sit on a tire. It doesn't have a motor to drive the tire. It is not a good example of a small thing that you can do to highlight what it would be like to own a car, or to be able to drive one around and to travel far distances in a short amount of time. Maybe a MVP would be a skateboard, or one of the scooters, or a motorcycle. because it has a lot of the same characteristics of it. So when people get hung up on building a prototype, they think they have to build the whole thing. No, a minimum viable product is, it should be, what is the thing that would give people the understanding that they can actually touch and feel and demonstrate of what the true vision that you have is. So